6Three podcast. Your host for the most in-depth analysis on all things sports, entertainment, and basically anything else you can come up with. Where we have some of the hottest takes, some of the craziest takes, but there we go, some of the dumbest takes, and where we believe that opinions are like. And now, to your hosts, Joel, Isaiah, and
Ben. Thanks for tuning into the 6Three podcast. I am your host, Joel. My co-hosts, Isaiah and Ben.
What up?
First day of September, which means football is getting super close.
Yeah.
So next week, we'll be coming with the NFL preview show, day after Labor Day. And today, we are going to focus on discussing the top four tight ends, debating who's that fifth tight end. And then we'll get into a subject about college football and the COVID-19 pandemic. So we got some decent stuff for you today. Let's scoot up to – what are the four tight ends? Let's just go with that. Well, who are the four tight ends, and then who do we slide in that fifth one?
We going in any order?
Yeah, let's
start at four.
I think we should start with number one.
Oh, you want to start? Okay, one.
I feel like we all have the same 1 and 2, so I feel like where it gets really juicy and where we'll get to the discussion is kind of the later few slots. So
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, my number one, I'm guessing it's on your guys, is Tony Gonzalez. 1,300 receptions, 15,000 receiving yards, 111 touchdowns, 6 first-team All-Pros. Long career, was just dominant throughout the career. I think that was the big thing. Like we've talked about on these other lists, like there's longevity versus dominance. Like he had both. He had a bit of both. So I don't think really there's anyone else up for debate for number one tight end ever. I mean, I guess you could debate it, but
it's always a debate. But yeah, 14.
It was an easy conversation in my head.
14 of the 17 seasons he made it to the Pro Bowl. Obviously, Pro Bowl isn't always the end-all, be-all, but that's super impressive. And in a sport to play 17 seasons where the tight end typically takes some serious punishment, whether in blocking some big dudes or taking some shots in the middle of the field. Obviously, one of the most durable guys in the world. But I don't know, man. You could move into second just because his Hall of Fame speech was just too long and boring, and I went and saw it in person, and I was tired.
I didn't think about that. Yeah,
it set the record for the longest Hall of Fame speech, and it was just
longer than Ray Lewis. Was it his like an hour long?
Yeah, Brett Favre's is long too, but man, Tony Gonzalez I think touched almost 50 minutes.
I could listen to Brett Favre talk about anything all day long, though. So
absolutely, I want to talk about Levi Jeans a little bit more.
Exactly. So
yes.
No, but I agree. I mean, his stats pretty much overmatch mostly everybody here on this list. And when they do overmatch everybody on the list, and you're like I said, the longevity and the production, consistent production throughout his career. Former basketball player. Kind of funny how that translates. Basketball player in college. Just freak athlete. I don't know, like he was just so consistent to where you kind of took him for granted, I think, towards the end of his career, when it was like, this dude's still putting up numbers when he's old, and it was just impressive. And just to be able, like Joel said, to be able to stay healthy for that long and not have any, career-threatening injuries or anything crazy for that long, it's impressive. So.
Yeah, well, you look at names like, we might talk about him one of the later spots, but Jason Witten or Antonio Gates or Greg Olson, these guys that do kind of go into their mid to late 30s in their career and are still somewhat productive. I mean, they usually become second fiddles to a younger, faster tight end, especially nowadays. The way that the NFL is going, where they want either a blocker or someone built on speed that can be like a fourth receiver. But Tony Gonzalez did that later in his career better than any of those other guys. And I think that's what made him so special. And these numbers are outrageous, and that plays to longevity, but it also just plays to, just consistent performance and consistent. I mean, not to sound redundant, but consistent consistency. Like he was just always there for the teams he played for, and he was the safety valve for a lot of for both those teams. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we talked about how obviously he was a former basketball player too, and I think that's become quite an asset. As someone that's, practiced playing basketball for so long, learned to use their body to block out other people behind them or whatever and go up and get it. And I think that's why my number 2 would be Antonio Gates, another former basketball player, played 1 season less than Tony Gonzalez and still racked up nearly 12,000 receiving yards, had 5 more touchdown catches than Tony Gonzalez, despite 1 season less. So obviously it's still one of those guys that was probably the best tight end at using his body in the red zone around anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He was never super elite fast either. He was a pretty chunker. He was kind of a chunker, but just a great athlete for his size. Yeah. And you see where his basketball game kind of came into play quite often.
Yep. Yeah. No, he was a good big body, and I think he even lined up at fullback sometimes, just because he could give that lead impact block pretty well, just throwing his weight behind it. Yeah, I had him at number 3. I had a different San Diego Charger at number 2. But yeah, no, Antonio Gates, super long career. When I started doing fantasy football a few years ago, I remember like someone would pick him and I'd just be like, he's still playing this game? Like he's still around? He's still doing that?
He was second fiddle to like Hunter Henry and other guys.
But
he wasn't good for 250 yards at that point.
Yeah, and Hunter Henry's great, but with his injury concerns, like they loved having Antonio Gates behind him because when Hunter Henry was down for, pretty much every season he's played, Antonio Gates was right there, and he obviously wasn't as explosive. They would have loved to have a little bit more variability on offense with Hunter Henry, but Antonio Gates was just there to catch the ball, especially in the red zone. Like you were saying, just do a little out route, but shove his back to someone and get open.
I think thing with Gates, it's another longevity thing because I literally remember playing like Madden 2004, and they've got like some of these guys in there, and then I'm playing, you going on later, and it's just like this guy's in every Madden game I can ever remember playing, period. And so yeah, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I would probably put Gates at 2 just because of the stats. I see the debate though because I know who you would have put for number 2, Isaiah, but I see the debate there just because the stats aren't everything, especially for this position, because it is back in the day it was a quasi second offensive or a extra offensive lineman, so it's hard to really quantify what a really good blocker gives you, you know what I mean? Because there's really good blocking tight ends right now in the NFL that they're not going to get any credit for it really on any of these lists unless they put up some sort of receiving numbers. So yeah, I can definitely see the argument there, but I feel like you probably got to put Gates at 2 just because the numbers are outrageous.
Yeah. So I think the reason though that like at 2, you really think about it. He still put those numbers. He played for 16 years, but he technically played for like 12 years. Like he just stuck it out too long. He only had about 1,500 receiving yards in his last 4 years, and about 16 touchdown catches. So 1,500 yards, 16 touchdown catches in your last 4 years. You're pretty much averaging like 350 yards a season and like 4 touchdowns a season, which isn't bad, but those are like rookie tight end numbers. So he just played a little longer, and most of his stats he got in 12 years, and that's why it takes a little bit away from him at the end because he just played too long. But he was an eight-time Pro Bowler for pretty much 12 healthy seasons.
We talked about that with other positions too. Some guys just, okay, maybe Calvin Johnson and Barry Sanders knew when their time was up, so they were ready to be done and they quit. Right? They quit while they were on top. Some guys they take too long to retire. Because I do remember this, the last 3 seasons probably that Antonio Gates was playing. I'm just like, he was talking about retiring, and then they always were like, hey, we'll restructure your contract because we need you to come back because we need a second tight end. And he's like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And it's just like, you just stuck it out too long, man. So, the career itself feels tainted a little bit just because you you were not as good at the end of the
You didn't leave at while you were still ahead, basically.
Exactly.
A lot of
You
people
got-
quit while you're still ahead, and he didn't.
Or I mean, everybody's expecting a little bit of a decline, but like
His was pretty drastic.
once you've already played 12, 13 years, it's like, all right, like you don't need to show anything more. But he did, and good for him. I mean, he loves playing football. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's just that's what I think a lot of people look at his career and say, oh, look at that. Look how bad he was at the end of the year. It's like, or end of his career. It's like, you know.
Well, I think something, especially like with that older thing, and maybe that's a former or a future discussion topic about like longevity of career versus dominance, but it's a crapshoot for like us to know. Like we can see a guy and say, man, he should really hang it up, and then he comes and has a really great year. But I think it's a crapshoot for them themselves. Like they know their bodies better than we do, obviously.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe they're just thinking like, man, like just one more year being a second fiddle, getting a couple $1 million, like I could get 500 yards and add to my esteem. Maybe this kid gets hurt and I get 800 yards and add to my history. Like who knows? Like who knows what it's going to be.
Like we talked about other positions, Frank Gore and Adrian Peterson's idea. Now that the NFL has changed to running back by committee, you know, they're guys that are still going to get their 400, 500 rush yards and 6 more touchdowns, even though they're second or third string running back now.
They have a place. They definitely have a place. And I mean, some guys, I mean, it's just, especially guys who play that long, obviously they love the game. And some guys just aren't ready to hang it up. You know, they want to play football. I mean, they feel like they're going to play football as long as they physically can play football. I mean, Tom Brady talks about it all the time. I mean, he always says he's going to play till he's 45, but I feel like if Tom Brady physically thought he could play till he's 50, he'd probably play till he's 50 because that guy loves playing football. So some guys just are that way, and you know I like those guys because that makes a good story. And you know what you hate is you know when a guy tries to gut it out like that and then he gets hurt. That's what you don't want to see.
Yeah, even Brett Favre.
Well, you have it like.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I was gonna say. Like you have that Brett Favre thing where it's almost just like I don't want you to retire because I think you're old or I think you're bad. Like it's just getting annoying at this point. Like
right.
Yeah, I think there's a window where you can come back. Like you can have like Rob Gronkowski where it's like he retires, everyone's kind of like, ooh, he's coming back at some point. But I think that's the way to do it. But yeah, then you have like, you just have perplexing cases like Jason Witten goes to be with Monday Night Football, and then he's like, I'm not good at this. People think I'm a robot. And then see his bad hair plugs, and then all of a sudden he's like, all right, well, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to go back to the NFL where I know I'm a better 30-whatever-year-old tight end than I am broadcaster. So
that's the thing with like, you know, Marshawn Lynch and Gronk coming back for specific reasons, not only because they love football. Gronk comes back because Tom Brady asked him to. Like, that's not necessarily I love football. Marshawn Lynch didn't really come back because he loved football. He definitely took some time off, but he wanted a chance to play with a new team because the Raiders. If it was anybody else, see, that's the thing. Like, Favre came back to go play with, like, the Vikings and the Jets, and, like, okay, that means you love football because you're pretty much willing to play with anybody. Whereas, like, these other guys had, I'm going to do this team, and I'm coming back only under certain conditions. That's not really a love for football.
Yeah, and like I think with Gronkowski, like, it's a bigger conversation, but people think it's like, oh, he hates Bill Belichick. No, Bill Belichick just expects him to like give 1,000,000% every day, and then it's still not good enough. Like, not saying, gosh, why can't I think of his name? Coach in Tampa Bay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, not saying he's not gonna expect him to be 100%, but I think he's going to be a little more forgiving and more like.
They got 2 other guys. They got Brayton, O.J. Howard. So.
Yeah. So I at my 2, like I said, and Ben, you kind of guessed it. I have Kellen Winslow Sr. Or the second. I think he's the second.
He's a senior. Yeah.
But yeah, short career, not terribly long, but almost 7,000 yards, almost 50 touchdowns, 540 receiving yards. One of the greatest NFL pictures ever of him being literally carried off the field in the playoffs by his teammates. Didn't have a terribly long career, but a very memorable career. A lot of good moments. He was definitely a reason to like watch West Coast football then, and he was dominant when he was playing.
Yeah, so 4 of those 9 seasons he played, obviously a short career, but only 4 of them still, of those 9, were 16-game seasons for him. So he had a lot of shortened seasons. Those numbers obviously still pretty good despite, short seasons for him or a short career for him. And that was really before the tight end was a super utilized position. Like it was in that awkward phase of they expect him to be that extra blocker or, they're too big to be a wide receiver. But like that's kind of when Shannon Sharp came, was in the 90s, is kind of when that moved over to like, okay, these oversized wide receivers, we can also use them in a passing game too. So the only reason is Dan Fouch just had such a strong rapport with Kellen Winslow that, that worked out. He put up some good numbers. Why Dan Fouch put up some good numbers all time too. But,
Winslow was kind of a different breed too for him. I mean, he had some speed at the tight end position when, even the guys who had some success catching the ball, around this time period, at the tight end position, most of them, they were just, big guys who just were big and they got open. I mean, Winslow could stretch the field.
Yeah, he was faster than a lot of safeties in that time.
And for Fouts, Fouts threw a good deep ball and was pretty accurate. Like that was, that was an added dimension to the tight end position that most people hadn't seen before, at least not consistently. So I think he was a little ahead of his time, maybe not as far ahead of his time as maybe some other guys that are going to be on this list. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah.
But he definitely changed the position to an extent, where it's like, all right, like, look, you can put some guys in here, like, if as long as they can hold their own at the line of scrimmage and still do what we need them to do blocking wise, if they can stretch the defense from that position, that really stresses the defense. If you got a quarterback that can give them the ball, so.
Yeah. Well, and I think, Kellen Winslow, like, I didn't look up if he did play basketball. If you watch some of his highlights, he looks like he's going for a rebound, like Dennis Rodman. Like he bounces it up with his hands and like catches way over his head to kind of like almost tip it to himself a lot of times. And he seems to just have like tremendous free ball control. Like he knows where to position his body, or knew where to position his body to get the ball wherever it was thrown within some distance of him. And he was a big body, so a lot of times that was fouls, just kind of throwing it above the defensive guy and just expecting Winslow to kind of tip it and then catch it and come down with it. But yeah, I think it would be interesting to see. I mean, it's like you can say it for a lot of these, especially tight ends, as we've been talking. We've said it for other guys. It'd be really interesting to see him play in one of today's offenses, where they're a little more creative with tight ends and a little more reliant on them in the pass, or some teams more reliant on them in the pass game. But yeah, I really like Kellen Winslow. I loved watching his highlights before the show or before making my list. But yeah.
Yeah, no, Kellen Winslow definitely. I had him right in that 3-4 spot, going back and forth with for me, Rob Gronkowski. I don't know if that's who you guys had at 4.
Yep.
That is, yep.
Number 4. So I mean, obviously, yeah, he 2010 to present, but he took about 2 years off, and still put up, averaged about almost 1,000 yards in the actual season that he's played, because he almost touched 8,000 receiving yards. And just short of 80 touchdowns, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 5-time Pro Bowler. Not a guy a lot of people looked at going to be a top tight end, but Patriots turned him out. I think he was out of Arizona, just like the rest of his brothers, and all the Gronk brothers were pretty much just known to be fullbacks in the NFL. And Gronk, the real Gronk, he stretched the field, and he turned out to be far more athletic than a lot of people expected him to be coming out of the draft. So
yeah. He was just, I don't know. They did so many different things with him too. I mean, creative offensively. I mean, they would split him out wide and try to get him on like an undersized corner and just box him out basically. I mean, soft hands. Obviously, having Brady as your quarterback does help, no doubt. Especially Brady in his prime, pretty much. I just. When 100% healthy and, clicking on all cylinders with Brady, I mean, pretty much unstoppable. Like, just completely unstoppable for the most part. I mean, the Patriots won a Super Bowl essentially on his back and Edelman and Brady, obviously, but literally, like, on a tiny slot receiver and then Gronk, who's just this massive guy, because you have to double or triple team him when he's healthy. Like you could not go
270. That's huge.
You can't guard him one-on-one. I mean, he's fast enough to beat linebackers, or he'll just body them. And he's too big for corners, and he's probably too big and too fast for safeties too. So, pretty much unguardable one-on-one. And what that did, it opened up stuff for everybody else. And I still remember it might have been that Super Bowl that they came back in, the 28-3 comeback. But I still remember there was like a big play, like down the sideline or whatever. Patriots were obviously struggling at this time. It kind of got them going again. And they triple teamed Gronk, and Brady just still was like, all right, I'm just going to throw it up there. And Gronk, like, over two guys, just jumps over, makes a catch, like, on top of some dude's helmet. And it was just like, yeah, like, you can't cover that guy when he's healthy enough to play. The question is, how often is he healthy enough to play? Because the dude got beat up.
He was barely healthy enough to play at that and that catch. Like,
Yeah.
I remember he had taken a full season on at that point too, and he was bruised and battered, and I don't know, that adrenaline kicked in being the Super Bowl, I think. But he gets to play second or third fiddle tight end this year, and I think he's still going to draw a lot of attention just because of his body size and Brady's.
I'm surprised if they really use him in the red zone. I mean, he's a red zone threat. Huge target. Brady obviously has a good relationship with him, and I feel like he's still probably. I mean, he's not going to put up his, career average numbers or whatever, that you just talked about, around 1,000 yards or whatever. But he might put up 5 or 6, 7 touchdowns. It really wouldn't blow me away at all if he does something like that.
Yeah. I wish. One, probably on this list, Gronkowski has the best off-field personality.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Just entertainment.
He can't
personified.
his voice is so he's so annoying.
No, but dude, from being at he was in people thought he was going to be a WWE wrestler for a while because he was at all these with them, and I guess there was a guy who was actually in the WWE. He went to high school or college with him and played football. I can't remember, but and he was going to team up with this guy, but then he, I think, was talking to Arians, probably talking to Tom, and didn't sign that contract. But just incredible personality. I really wish he would have been healthy every season and played a full season, because I really think, I'd probably still give it to Gonzalez for longevity, and Gates up there if you're talking about longevity. But if Gronkowski would have played, not missed those games kind of in the middle of his career and towards the end, he could be pushing number 2 for sure. If you put just another 1,000 yards on his resume, maybe 10 touchdowns and a few receptions, probably if he's healthy, another first team all pro. He's got 4, but he could have probably had 5. And if he would have been healthy his whole career, I think he'd be making a really big case for number 2. And if you're not taking longevity into account, maybe even number 1, because like you guys are saying, being triple team, being double team, no matter what the matchup is, there's a handful of guys in the NFL who can cover Gronkowski, or who are comfortable even covering Gronkowski. That they'll even say, okay, I can try this out. And then a coach will say, well, we're going to shadow another guy underneath you. Mm-hmm. But
I would say physically, at peak health, probably best ever.
Yeah.
I'd put him, just because he's faster, probably, and bigger than Gonzalez, and just probably best ever. But obviously, you can't put him above Gonzalez or Gates, in my opinion, just because, just didn't, the numbers are there, I guess, if per average for sure, but you just can't really put him there with haven't played nearly as long. Probably definitely can't put him above Gonzalez, because Gonzalez just did it every year.
Right.
So.
Yeah. And I think one of Gronk's biggest attributes, kind of like Kittle is today, he could block too. He was, and he kind of learned that being, for a couple seasons, second fiddle to Aaron Hernandez. Hernandez was the catching tight end.
Ben Watson too. Ben Watson was pretty good early on too.
Yep. So Gronk was behind, had to find a way to get on the field and get playing time, and he had to block for that. So he still. He's got the arm issues and the shoulder issues, but he still kept doing that. And he kind of threw that big club around at some guys. He would use that to push people off and kind of give them some space. And I think that really helped his game. That's kind of why people think George Kittle's so incredible, because he is a great pass catcher and a tremendous blocker. And Gronk really laid the foundation for that. He was kind of doing what George Kittle is doing now, just for the past few years.
Number 5, obviously we talked about trying to squeeze in this number 5. To me, I think this one has to be the closest to obvious number 5, and I'm going to go with Shannon Sharp.
Okay. Yeah, the stats probably are there.
Obviously, I don't know who you guys have replacing him. I have Ozzie Newsome and John Mackey as guys that possibly could sneak into that spot, and those are the 3 guys I went back and forth on.
I had John Mackey.
At 5? Okay.
At 5.
Yeah, I had John Mackey.
Okay.
But
yeah. Shannon Sharp has the stats because he played 14 years. So,
right.
I mean, obviously.
Different brand of football at the time. So, compared to John, if we're going to just compare him to Mackey, way different brand of football.
Yeah, for sure.
You can't really go – I don't think you can go wrong with Shannon Sharp in that spot. I think he probably – he deserves to be 5 or 6 for sure.
Yeah.
The only reason I picked Mackey is, and it kind of is how I did a lot of my lists. Like, I just felt like, some of these older guys just needed to be on the list because of how they changed the game and how the game, evolved just because of how, they played a position different than it ever been played before.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Mackey, the Mackey Award is named after him for the, best college tight end, which, great. But he was just different. I mean, what was he like? I think he was 6'5", like 230 maybe. I mean, that's pretty big for back then. Let me see here. I got all this stuff right here.
Yeah, I mean, half of his career he was also a Pro Bowler, which is good because back then, I mean, it wasn't necessarily fan vote because they didn't have access.
Actually, he wasn't even 6'5", so he was 6'2", 224. Not that big.
That is, yeah, those are small. That's a wide receiver these days.
Exactly, but if he's a tight end and he's still able to block, I mean, imagine what that does for a defense. Okay, now he can catch the ball and he can block like that. And, obviously he's playing in the 60s. So
yeah, we're looking at defensive ends at that time that were probably pushing 225 also.
Exactly. So a little different, but, that's kind of how the game evolves a little bit. If you watch any of his tapes, I mean, he's just consistently, breaking tackles. And kind of what I talked about with Winslow, he had breakaway speed. At 6'2", 224 or 225 or whatever he was, he had breakaway speed. And you got a guy, lined up at tight end, and there was no spread offense back then, so you're not putting him in the slot or splitting him out wide or doing any of that. I mean, you're lining him up at tight end, and you're pretty much expecting those guys to block. And then if suddenly this guy gets on top of a safety or a linebacker with some crazy speed, I mean, that's a touchdown. I mean, you can't cover that back then. So he definitely changed the game.
More impressive to his credit is, back in the day where they didn't have the same kind of equipment used for protection as they do today, and it's still Mackey in a position that takes some heat.
Yes.
Missed 1 game in his 10-year career. That's wild.
Yeah,
that's hard to do.
Yeah. I
put
Mackey on there,
man. I tell you.
I put Mackey on there similarly, just to give some credence to some of those older players. And just kind of the history of the position. I think he really did. If you're going to talk about that angle of it, I think he's the first guy that deserves to be mentioned. About like the history of the tight end position, but yeah, he was still great. Like he had a lot of, it put up good numbers for that time and for his career. Like still having over 5,000 yards is pretty impressive around then. But yeah, I had Shannon Sharp right at 6. It was between those guys. If I wasn't kind of just paying homage to the history, I'd probably put Shannon Sharp just because those numbers are crazy. But I still think like John Mackey, for a little bit of a shorter career on the short side with how our lists are going, still put up really impressive numbers.
Yeah, the numbers aren't like, I don't know, because I feel like in some of our quarterback ones and some of the other ones we've done, some of those numbers are like, those numbers are actually kind of crappy. Like
I especially remember seeing that they were like 500 on touchdown to interception rates.
Yeah, it's like, what the heck? But but like for these tight ends, I mean, like Winslow and for Mackey here, like those numbers aren't bad. Those numbers are very good even like now. Mm-hmm. Like, are they like all world rating now? Probably not, but they are very, very good. And then you take into account like Joel, you were talking about earlier, what that could equate to like now, if they're, kind of like you're comparing like money with inflation and those yards and those numbers, put them in today's offense or put them in how today's game's played. that could be pretty crazy. So,
I know. Like when we were talking about like quarterbacks, like we talked about like Otto Graham. Not the best numbers, but like he changed the game a lot. He did a lot of great things people weren't doing, and like we had to talk about him. But I wanted to throw another name out there to you guys. He was number 7. I had a short list just because I didn't spend a huge amount of time prepping for this. But where would you guys put Jason Witten?
Probably right around 9 or 10.
Yeah. Maybe.
I think obviously Ozzie Newsome and Mike Ditka I would put still after even Shannon Sharp at 6. If we're doing that, I think 7 and 8. Probably Mike Ditka and Ozzie Newsome.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't. That's why I would say at the earliest I would put Witten probably at like 9, 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I had him at 7, but I only had 8 people on my list. Mike Ditka right after him, but I kind of just put those guys at the end of the list just to have names up there. So, yeah, I think I would actually put Ditka probably ahead of Jason Witten.
I think me adding Ditka, like I wrote down Ditka and Ozzie Newsome on my list, and obviously I figured that 5 spot would have gone between probably Mackey and Shannon Sharp, kind of like it did for us. But I think that having Newsome and Ditka there just kind of allowed me to gauge the measurables, the difference between some of these other upper echelon tight ends of all time.
I think you got to put Dave Casper somewhere near.
Dave Casper, yep, he's
top 10.
Yeah. I was looking up his stats. I didn't write his name down, but he was definitely like a name I was remembering as I was putting my list together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's the disadvantage of us being 28 and younger,
right?
As podcast hosts here, so we don't get to see the full sample other than like we're watching NFL Network's greatest tight ends of all time, see some of those ridiculous highlights of like Dave Casper, Ozzie Newsome, or John Mackey or Kellen Winslow. Like that's I think we have a little bit in our head because we aren't able to see how much better far and away they were than the players of their time.
Right, and we see the Gronks and the Wittens and we saw Gonzalez, even though we didn't. I mean, we saw most of Gonzalez, I suppose, and we saw a ton of Gates and stuff like that. So we see what physical freaks these guys are, and like how far ahead of the game these guys are. But I think what we have to take into account is, okay, those guys are that way, but the Winslows and the Dave Caspers and those guys, those like the people who watched football then and were fans then, who were our age then, that's what they thought of those guys then. They thought,
who knows if we had like our dads or whatever on on the show, they would probably argue that
like Kellen Winslow is the great, they'd be doing that.
Just like I mean, like your dad said, Barry Sanders. I got to watch Barry Sanders maybe like 1 year. I remember watching it like 1999 when I first started watching football.
Never got to see him.
Yeah, I know. And then I wish I could have seen more, but everything we get is like highlights. But we hear from like the men in the room, that these guys are the best all time, and they'll argue Joe Montana is still better than Tom Brady, and I'm like, all right, come on. You know what I'm saying? Like they've got their idea in their head of guys that have changed the game, changed the position, and we're far and away better than everyone else on the field at that time.
Right.
Well, I think we're gonna have that too. Like, I mean, our kids, I guess, or like the generation after us is gonna be looking at like Patrick Mahomes and like some of these other guys, some of probably these younger guys that are still in college or even high school right now, and like, man, it's the best player ever. We're gonna be like, Tom Brady is the best player ever. I don't care if Patrick Mahomes has 7 Super Bowls.
Yeah, we are though. I mean, that's you're not wrong, because I don't know. I feel like that always happens, because I actually kind of was talking to my dad about this one time, and he was like, yeah, my dad thought George Kell was the greatest baseball player to ever live.
My dad says Johnny Bench. My dad loves Johnny Bench.
He goes, George Kell played in the 40s. No, he wasn't.
Dude, if you ask any person over 30 years old or 40 years old in New York, it's Mickey Mantle. Like, and no one will ever be better than Mickey Mantle, and no one has ever been better than Mickey Mantle. And you'd probably still be very high on most people's lists of best baseball players.
Oh, no doubt.
My grandpa loves Henry Aaron. Like, that's just how, like, Hank Aaron. Yeah, like some of the greatest players of all time.
And I think that's what I like doing these lists about football, because with baseball, hockey, and even NBA, like, you kind of talk about the best player of all time, and it's position list to some extent, but like when it comes to the NFL, we can say Tom Brady's the best player of all time, but you really don't get into it unless you talk about position. You don't really get into it unless you kind of break it down on an even bigger level, because like with the NBA, if you're like, oh, who's the best power forward ever, you're going to be like, okay, it's one of these guys, but Michael Jordan's still the best player ever. And it depends.
Yeah.
It depends what you look for when you talk about the NFL, but I mean, shoot, if you like, you could say maybe Jerry Rice is the best football player ever because he was the best at his position in the audience numbers, or Barry Sanders or whatever. Like, I think it's always going to still boil down to probably a quarterback because they're the one leading the team, or a linebacker maybe if it's someone like that's very defensive minded, who's like a Lawrence Taylor or something. But when it comes to NFL, you get really into it with these positions where it's like in the NBA and generationally because the positions change so much. Whereas like the NBA, it's Michael Jordan. Like everyone, it's yeah, LeBron James comes and goes, and like some of these other guys from way like back in the day, but it's like it still kind of just stays the test of time. Michael Jordan or your Wayne Gretzky or something. Like I really like it with the NFL where you get deeper into kind of some of those things of time periods and how the positions change and how the game changes and what these guys used to do and why that's so great. But yeah, so
yeah, so. Great discussion. Another thing that we want to talk about today was how college football and specifically the Big Ten is like picking up traction and then losing traction. Are they going to have play in the fall or not? And how should college football be handling this pandemic? Anyone got words? Yeah, go for it, Ben.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I'm not a doctor. So I will not be putting any takes on any kind of whether they should be playing, whether they won't be playing, whether they shouldn't be playing. I'm not going to put the medical side. I'm not really going to talk about that. What I am going to talk about, though, is how things have been handled, regardless of whether you're deciding to play or not play, okay? This is where I have issues, all right? Let's just, take it back to the Big Ten shutting everything down, okay? They, what was it? Probably 3 weeks ago when they finally shut it all down officially. Maybe a month, maybe about a month ago.
Yeah.
My issue with that is, okay, you bring all these players in, right? You tell them they can start practicing. You tell them they can start working out. You tell them they have to follow these guidelines, right? To do that, all the players are on board. There were a few COVID outbreaks here and there that were handled, internally, whatever. That's gonna happen, right? I mean, you're seeing it in the MLB right now. They haven't had anything crazy. I mean, the Cardinals thing was a problem.
And they had like 12.
But really, it got handled, right? I mean, It was almost a horrible disaster, but it was taken care of and handled, and the Cardinals are back playing, right?
Yeah, and now there really haven't been anything.
No, I mean, there's been a couple series canceled here and there, but they're traveling, like they're doing, they're not in a bubble. The NBA is obviously in a bubble, so they're able to handle a lot easier, a lot different. But so you're bringing all these players back on campus, right? And they're pretty much living with themselves, and they're doing their thing, and that's how it normally is around this time anyway, right? So you bring them all in. You tell them they need to follow these guidelines. They are following these strict guidelines, for the most part. Obviously, I'm sure there's exceptions, but they are following them. The test numbers aren't insane. But there's no oversight from anybody, like NCAA-wise. Every school has different guidelines, right? So some schools, they're like, yeah, we'll send out our testing numbers. Other schools are like, no, I'm not going to do that. The SEC schools are like, no, we're not sending out our testing numbers. Of course they're not going to send out their testing numbers. Yeah. They want to play, right? So they're not sending them out. The Big Ten schools are sending them out constantly. Hey, we tested 550 people and had 0 positive, whatever. So they're sending all these things out. It's just like, okay, there's no real oversight. There's no real set way that we're supposed to be doing things. But, okay, fine, whatever. You're leaving it up to the conferences. You're leaving it up to the schools, fine. Okay. My issue with the Big Ten is you bring everybody back, you make a schedule, and you send it out. And then 4 days later, you say, never mind.
Yeah.
We're good. Yeah. Nah, we can't do this anymore. Why did you make a schedule then? What was the point? Was it just oh, okay, this is a ceremonial thing, cool. I'm real excited about this. Everybody's happy for 3 days, and now we're just gonna axe it just like that. Like, what changed? My whole thing is, and there's no like clarity, and there's no transparency on like what changed their mind in those 4 days. There's like ideas, there's thoughts, there's different medical things that may have come out during that time. And like I said, I'm not really going to talk about that because that's not really my place or whatever. But why can't they let people know?
Mhm.
Why can't they just be like, hey, this is what we found, and after consulting doctors or doing whatever, this is why we decided that we're going to do this. This is why we decided that we can't play. Why can't they just come out and say it? Like, that's my problem with it. Like, why can't they give anybody clarity? Like, fans, parents, players, anything. I mean, if you see any interviews with anybody in the Big Ten, anybody in the, in the parents, obviously, some of them are pissed, whatever. Like, they're pissed because it's like, okay, you let my son go back to school. He wants to play football. And then now you're telling him he can't. And you exposed him to all this garbage in the process. And then just told him, oh, sorry, never mind. Thanks for your tuition. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, and like, the lack of transparency and just communication with the larger public. And like, there's two sides of it. Like, one, do these people high up in their towers on these campuses need to talk to us? No, they don't. At the end of the day, I mean, they don't need to care about Isaiah Hager or Joel Hortzman or Ben Wheaton. Like, who cares? But at the same time, like, where their money comes from is the fans for the most part. So like, it's kind of like, hey, I'd like to know what's happening. But like you're saying, I feel like they set out the schedule and they said, like, we're only going to do in-conference games. And I get that. Like, it's less travel. It's easier to kind of coordinate. It's easier to kind of plan that out and have a shorter season for the people that are calling for it to be canceled outright. If they're trying to, pander a little bit and just be responsible. Like, I get that. But then all of a sudden I get an alert on my phone on ESPN that, athletic directors from Big Ten schools are meeting on Tuesday whether to cancel all sports. And it's like, oh, shoot, like, what is happening? Like, I thought they had already met to kind of discuss these other things, and now they're meeting again to just throw it out. And, like, with seemingly, at least, like, again, I'm not a medical expert, but seemingly on the COVID front, there wasn't any changes, like, in the grand scheme of, like, across the country. Like, it was kind of like on that, as most states are and most places are, especially like Big Ten with the Midwest. Still, things are kind of bouncing up and down day to day, but kind of on that downward slope, kind of flattening out. It seemed like everything was kind of just like, it seemed like nothing changed, and then they changed their decision. I don't know if they got pushback that we didn't hear about from either governors or mayors or whatever.
Liberal media.
Like, in media, like, I don't know if they got like funding pulled because people, like, rich Republicans or rich Democrats, whoever supports whichever school, like, pulled out and said, I'm not giving you this money unless you don't play, or I'm not giving this money unless you play a full season. But it just seemed like and the NFL did this a little bit, but they kind of are just sticking to their guns. The NCAA was just kind of, or we should say just the conferences, because it's different per conference. But it just seemed like they were like, oh, hey, we're going to do this thing today, and then, oh, next week we're going to do this other thing, but we're not going to tell you about it till the day before, and then you're just going to have to deal with it. And it's just like, I just want to know kind of what's happening and what the rationale is here.
It just seemed like there was no plan. Like,
yeah,
it just
really
seemed
did.
like, oh, like, what were you discussing since March?
Oh, that's what I was just going to say.
What in the world? Like, I'll let you go with it. Go ahead. Like,
no, I 100% agree. I'm like, you've had 5+ months to get a plan together.
exactly.
Other sports have gotten a plan together in even a shorter period of time to bring back NHL, to bring back NBA, to get baseball ready even after, no spring training and pretty much losing a third of the season almost. Like,
Exactly.
They've all come up with a plan, and still, obviously the SEC and the ACC and the Big 12, their seasons are still going. We saw Central Arkansas play Austin Peay the other day. But
no positive tests, by the way, after the game.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna still have a couple positive tests. And again, I'm not a doctor, but I am a podcaster with opinions, and I love sports. And I know it's not about me, but you do see some of the players have chosen to opt out because that's what they want to do, and they feel comfortable doing that. That's cool. That's their business. But there are a lot of players that don't want to lose time to be scouted to play at the next level, have all these opportunities. These opportunities don't last forever. This playing or delaying or moving the season to the spring delays a lot in trying to get to the NFL draft to work, because the NFL season is still going. Like they're not putting anything to halt. Do they cut the draft down to 3 rounds? Because who else? You have limited scouting at that point, or only SEC, ACC, or Big 12 players getting drafted. And I could go off on that tangent too. But why is there? People are worried that maybe lawsuits come because a player gets it and they even die or something. I think people know football, and the risks that come with it, i.e. CTE or something, or high injuries or something. COVID, obviously seeing that like you said, Isaiah, the curve is flattening. Sports have been able to handle it even if they're not staying in a bubble like the MLB, like you said, Ben. And I think if these players that want to play sign a waiver, these Big Ten schools, their football team specifically, Michigan carries 115 guys on that roster. And I'm sure that there are still 60 guys on that roster that are okay with playing.
More than that, I guarantee you.
I'm just saying that's enough for an NFL team. An NFL team is 53 players, and that's enough to get a team going. If those guys sign waivers and say, I understand the risks, and I will not file a lawsuit or whatever, and that's approved, that's written down by the player, and if they have parents that need to sign it or something, then cover your bases. But the season,
players, and I don't know about like with them not like being student athletes, maybe there's something on the legal side that we don't know about because we don't know about legality and lawyer issues. But yeah, it's just like I don't see how you can't make it work. Like I don't see how it called for a full cancellation. Like even if your biggest, that's the thing about like college football, like that's different than the NFL. Like if your biggest names aren't in, like people still watch it. People watch college football less for the players than the NFL. People watch the NFL, the NBA, pro sports for the stars. That's why people stay up late for a West Coast game to watch Mike Trout. Like, and there's still obviously that still exists in the college football, but I think the NCAA doesn't want to admit that because that gets into a conversation about paying athletes. Like if they make a statement like, well, we want our stars playing, like we want to cancel the season so we have recognizable names, then it's like, oh, so you're openly talking about profiting off your highest individuals, why aren't they? And so I don't know if there's legality issues that come into the mix in these things, but I just, like you're saying, Joel, I don't know how they couldn't fill a roster and be able to play games.
The NLI issues, the name and likeness and like the, paying players things, it does, there's crossover with this issue too, because so people were saying, okay, let's put them in a bubble. Let's do exactly what the NBA is doing or something similar. And it's like, first of all, you can't do that because they're students. Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So let's say you do come up with a way to do it. Hey, they can do online classes. Most schools are doing that anyway. It's no different. Fine. Valid point. But you just can't force players into a bubble if you're not paying them. Like NBA players didn't even want to do it, and they were going to be paid. Like you can't, like you got to pay them something, and they're saying, oh, they have their scholarships. Sure, but like you can't force them into a bubble for 5 months, 6 months, to however long it's going to take to get through a full college football season, plus, college football playoff and national championship and bowl games. If you're really thinking about that and all that, you can't do that unless you pay players. So the NCAA has no choice. They can't do that. Because one, there's no structure to be able to pay players right now. So there's no way to regulate. There's no way to do that right now. So they have no choice. They can't do that. Which is why the NCAA said, all right, we're not doing anything. Like they're literally not doing anything. They are doing nothing right now.
It just seems lazy to me. There was some
kind of – It is because they had all the time in the world to do something, and they didn't. Yeah. That's the problem. But now they're sitting there going, okay, now they're sitting there going, we have to sit on our hands because we did nothing. We have no plans. We said the conferences are on their own. But, and the conferences, what do? They sat on their hands. They did nothing. You knew this was a thing. You should have been planning this. You should have been figuring out how to make this work. And you know what? If you had a plan of how to make it work, and it failed. And, you said finally, hey, like, it's just, we can't do it. Like, we literally cannot do it. But this was our plan. I could at least live with that. I could be like, all right, they tried. They really did try. And
they communicated it with us.
They communicated.
I mean, not that they owe us. Not that they owe us.
No, and it's not even – my problem is it's not even me that needs to know, or the fans that need to know. The players and parents don't even know what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
Like what in the world? Like, nobody has any idea what's happening. So it's one of those things where it's like you're not even letting your teams and your coaches don't even know what's going on. Athletic directors are in the dark on this, because league presidents are just making these decisions, and it's like you can't do that. Like, you can't, especially in today's day and age when things get blown up and blown out of proportion in the media and scrutinized like crazy and politicized like this. You can't do that, because it's a black eye for the Big Ten right now. It is a huge black eye for the Big Ten. If the SEC, ACC, if all the other conferences that are going to play are able to pull it off, that's bad.
Yeah.
I think
so.
Like you're saying, like some communicate, like to just be able to look at them and say, okay, you had a plan, it didn't work out, that's fine. But it just seems like talking about college sports, it seems like they're college students where it's just like right now, I'm starting classes tomorrow, and I'm really bad at this. But like, you have this project is due in 12 weeks. It's like it's 30% of your grade. You have to do good on it. It's a research paper. You got to do your work. And you just put it off till week 11, and you're just like, holy crap, I have that research paper due next week. And I think that NFL and the NCAA got into this with college football, where they, like the NFL, I think they didn't really have much communication either this whole summer. They just had a plan that seems like it's going to work.
Well, it's easier with professional sports, though. It's easier.
Yeah, but it seems like the NCAA conferences were just like, oh, our season starts in a month. We have to make this decision now. Like, we didn't make it in March. We didn't make it in April. We didn't make it in June. Now it's July, and we're starting, like, people are asking about training camp, getting on campus early, doing two-a-days, doing their practices, all this stuff. And then they're just like, and they throw something together and it fails. Like, that's just really what it seems like right now. And I really don't know how the Big Ten and the Pac-12 get out of this ahead. Like, I think like the Big 12 or Big 10 was kind of saying like, oh, maybe we'll start on Thanksgiving, or maybe we'll start in the new year. But which I guess some people would be kind of okay with that. But like you're saying, if the Pac or the Big 12, the SEC, the ACC gets away with this and it goes off well, and there's minimal case spread, there's minimal problems, the Big 10 and the Pac-12 are going to look terrible. Like, it's either they look the same as everyone else is looking right now, or they look terrible. Like, those are their two options.
I mean, the only way they come out looking like geniuses is if, this gets shut down after like 2 weeks. The SEC has to cancel after like 2 weeks because it's too much. The COVID cases blow up and it's just like a disaster. Yeah, then they look like the smartest guys in the room. But right now they look like idiots because everybody else is finding ways to pull this thing off. And I really have, I have a problem with – my problem really isn't with the lack of transparency. My biggest problem is, like we've just been talking about, my problem is that they had time to figure something out. Like, they should have been planning this ever since the NCAA basketball tournament got shut down. Mm-hmm. Like, as soon as that, like, I remember I was getting ready to watch Michigan play basketball, actually, and then they got pulled off the court. They were about to play Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament. Yeah. As soon as that type of stuff happened, as soon as all that got shut down, the NBA, as soon as the Donovan Mitchell disaster saga started going on, somebody should have been, okay, this is going to blow up. Like, we're aware, like, the wheels are turning here. We got to figure out a way to put on a football season somehow. Like, obviously, like, well, you didn't know everything about the virus at the time either. Like, there's stuff like that. But, like, you should have been evolving your plan as, more information came out. And you should have been trying to find a way to do that from the moment one and changing things if you needed to. And I just –
you had that with the NBA and the NHL. Yeah, like, exactly. It was only a couple weeks after they stopped operations that Orlando said we'll host a restart for the NBA season. Toronto, Las Vegas, Denver, they all said, like, hey, whenever you guys want to come back to finish this season, like, we'll do it. And I think it left a little more kind of like they really wanted to do it because it was the end of their season. Like they wanted to finish the season. It wasn't about starting the season. So it was a little more like media of a conversation that they needed to have. But it seemed like Adam Silver in the NBA, within 2 weeks of that their first game being shut down when it was Utah versus I think Oklahoma City, and they walked them off the court, or Utah versus Dallas, but they walked them off the court. And I think like, yeah, within 2 weeks they were like, okay, what can we do? And then like within 3 weeks they were talking about a bubble already. They were already talking about inviting teams and getting like all these owners and all these GMs to approve things and see what worked. And yeah, it just seems like the Big Ten again, like to use the metaphor, it seems like they were just a college student who procrastinated till the end of their semester. Like that's just what it seems like. And it like, again, life goes on. Like I don't need sports to like be a happy person. It makes me happier. Like I love watching.
Pulls the
sports.
podcast up a little bit.
Yeah, it's I love waking up at like 9 o'clock and game days on, and then like I'm like it's noon and I'm like, man, I really want to see Northwestern and Minnesota play this 13-6 game in the rain.
Exactly.
In Western, like I want to see the purple jerseys. Like I'm gonna miss it, but it really like yeah, it's not the worst thing that's ever happened in the world, but it just I just
disappointing.
I feel it's disappointing, and I feel bad for just like you're saying, like these like freshmen and seniors in college who like were told for months that they'd be able to play, and they got on campus ready to play. They probably had a couple practices ready to play, then a couple games taken from them, but they're still playing and they're still ready for it, and they're still willing to like make their draft stock rise. This like having a college football season changes people's lives because they get to show up and get drafted the next year and break out and do these great things and then have future endorsement deals and whatnot. And that's just taken from them. Like it's just taken from them, and it's taken from their parents that paid for them to get there. For those that are on scholarship, it pays and paid for all their stuff, even if they are on scholarship. And it's just like, I would, if I was a dad and my son was going to college to play football in the Big Ten or Pac-12, I would be absolutely furious.
Yep. Well, I would be furious because no one explained anything. I feel like as a parent, you're sending your kid to college, you're paying for his college, maybe, or his athletic talents are paying for his college, but you raised the child, so you're getting something, and I would just be furious because from all accounts, there was no communication in the Big Ten, and there's no communication in the Pac-12. There's no communication about why these things are happening. And then Kevin Warren, the Big Ten commissioner, is going on. He did an interview with The Athletic, and he did couple different interviews and stuff. And it's like he's still not answering any questions. It's like, dude, like just at this point, just come out and say we had no plan, we screwed up, I'm sorry. Like it's just like at this point, everybody's seeing through it, and now it's just like you're looking worse and worse with every day. Now you got the president calling you saying, hey, you need to play and whatever. I'm not that I disagree with Donald Trump, but it's like it should have never gotten to this point. Like it never needed to get here. Like why preemptively shut it down when everybody else is attempting to do it? Why would you just shut it down when everybody else is finding a way to figure it out? And your teams are going above and beyond to stay safe during all this. Why would you preemptively shut it down when, from all accounts, it wasn't needed at that point? Obviously, if it becomes too dangerous or you've got problems and it's just becomes a disaster, obviously you got to shut it down. And you're going to get backlash from anybody saying, hey, you should have never even started, blah blah blah, you should have shut this down back in April, whatever. Yes, that's going to happen anyway, though. Like,
you're always going to have haters.
Exactly. Either way. So you just got to accept it. But what's a better way to do it? What's a better way to do it? I mean, most of the coaches that I've heard talk are saying, look, we want to coach and we want to play because of our players, like for our players, for our coaches, this is their livelihood. The players, this is their livelihood for the guys that, want to play at the next level. one, and for the guys that aren't, or the walk-ons, or the guys that definitely are not going to play in the NFL. This is their college. This is the formative years of their life that they want to, that they're experiencing, and it's just ripped away from them without any explanation. So that's my problem with it.
The Celtics just went 2-0 up on the Toronto Raptors. So
Not surprised.
Look at them go. Look at them go. Yo, we still have some time left, so I'm going to sneak in those cards, and you guys are going to go at it.
All right.
right.
All right. So here we go. Pick one.
Good look. Who is that?
New York Rangers.
Hmm.
Is that Wayne Gretzky?
It is not.
No.
Gosh, it looks like him. He didn't play for the Rangers. No, he did.
He did.
He did.
Hmm.
I
At least you got the team down, right?
Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, this is back in 2004. It is Jaromir Jagr.
Oh, there
Ah,
you go.
is he still playing?
He is not.
He's not. He finally retired.
All right. This
Somebody
guy,
who stuck around a little too long.
here's his college card, but he didn't go to the NFL later.
Marshawn Lynch? No.
Sean Marino.
It is no Sean Marino.
Sorry, I thought it was Buffalo colors for
The Broncos.
Yeah, that's the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yep.
All right. Soccer.
Wayne Rooney.
No.
I don't know.
I don't know, man.
Taylor Twellman.
Oh, yeah. He's the guy that talks about soccer on ESPN all
Yeah,
the time.
he does. Yeah.
Oh, right. He's the one that gets really mad at the national team.
All right. Women's golf.
Good grief.
Dude, I have no idea. No idea.
Annika Sorenstam.
No.
Never going to get it.
It's not Michelle Wee, so I don't know.
She is white.
Tiger Woods.
This is Paula Kramer.
Okay, yeah.
Sure.
All right.
That probably is.
Tyson Gay.
It is Tyson Gay. Nice. Oh, look at that.
Andre Agassi.
It is Andre Agassi. All right.
Craig Biggio.
It's Craig Biggio. Oh, my goodness. He's slam, boy. All right.
Yao Ming.
That's
Yeah.
Yao Ming.
Well, are you sure? It could have been the other two. One of the other two
Hey,
guys.
yeah, who are those other guys?
Somebody for the Lakers. Rip Hamilton.
Oh, my gosh. That was a tie.
Yeah.
I got to do a quick one here. Oh, yep. Here we go. Now I got to do my extra innings.
Manu Ginobili.
It's Manu Ginobili.
That's Manu with hair, man.
And then the last one.
Ken Griffey Jr.
Gary Sheffield.
It's Gary Sheffield. Hey, you didn't get swept, Isaiah. That's good.
No.
Hey, we did a lot of sports I have literally no idea about. So
Well, I did 3, I think, total that were basketball and hockey.
yeah, but I don't know track and field.
I mean, there could have been There's only two.
Should have got Andre Agassi.
There's only two there's multiple very successful, but recent successful American track stars like that, and Tyson Gay and Justin Gatlin. And I knew it wasn't Justin Gatlin, so
Yeah.
Tyson Gay.
See, I saw yellow and green on his shorts, and I thought he was from a different country. So that's why
Jamaican.
I was like, I don't know, someone who was second fiddle to Usain Bolt.
There wasn't there another runner though from Jamaica though that was.
There was another guy. No, there was a guy before Bolt who was like older than him who could fly, and I forgot his name.
I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, there's like
It's gonna kill me.
yeah, like Usain Bolt was always the best, obviously, but like there were a couple other guys who were finishing in
Had an insane team.
like top 5 right along with them from Jamaica. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 2016 Summer Olympic.
Any predictions for NBA championship winner?
I don't know. This Heat Bucks series is going to be insane. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, what Jimmy Butler did yesterday was kind of nuts, but
Yep. I think the East playoffs is way more interesting than the West.
Yes.
Oh, it was Johan Blake.
Johan Blake. That was his name.
But I think these 2 Game 7s, Utah and Denver tonight, and then Oklahoma City and Houston tomorrow,
Yes.
going to be like, if you haven't watched any NBA games, like these are probably the games to watch.
Yes. I think that the Heat are a terrible matchup for the Bucks, though.
Yeah.
They're a terrible matchup because
the
Bucks
the
give
Heat,
up 3-pointers. They may be the best defense in the league, but they give up threes. Like, that's what they do. So I don't know. I mean, obviously Jimmy Butler took over, but the Heat are going to win based off the 3-point shooting, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. Well, and if you're going to have anybody in the NBA who's not named Kawhi Leonard to guard Giannis, it's probably Bam Adebayo.
Yep.
But he is probably, I mean, for a big man, probably just as, or close to as athletic as Giannis as you can get.
Did you see early in the game, he shoved Giannis out of the way going through the lane. He missed the dunk, but I was like, okay. Like, I was like, you don't see that very often.
Yeah, that brings back early 90s basketball again.
Yeah, I mean, just knocked him over, basically. No foul, obviously, and just missed the dunk.
So, did you guys say that 8:30 tonight was the Jazz Nuggets?
Jazz Nuggets is at 8:30 tonight.
And that whoever wins that is going to the next round, right? It's 3-3.
To play the Clippers.
Yeah, it's 3-3. That's another good matchup. Do you think the Nuggets, because it's a home game, I think they could win that one?
I mean, there isn't really home court.
That's true. It's a bubble. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I feel like the Nuggets should win. I think everyone would want the Nuggets. Most people want the Nuggets to win, but
Donovan Mitchell's going to roll up 50. I tell you.
I know. That's the thing. They need Jamal Murray to match Donovan Mitchell, and hopefully he can again.
They're both the 2 top scorers, I think, right now per game.
Yep. Whoever gets, I mean, that's again why the East is more fun, because it's just who do you want to get beat by a team from LA?
But between Conley and Mitchell, though, that's like 10 3-pointers a game. Like, that's a nice little for sure.
I think I'd like Denver to win just because I think they could give a better matchup to the Lakers, and I don't want LeBron to win. So
I'm with you.
That'll be a fun game. I might check out some. I won't be able to stay up for that whole thing, but I'm going to definitely try to check it out.
Yeah, I think my early prediction is I think it's going to be LA Clippers versus the Bucks.
Soon, man.
I think it's going to be Clippers versus Celtics in the championship.
Yeah,
I'm a Celtics fan, but if the Heat do have the favorable matchup against the Bucks and they do win, I think the Celtics are the favorable matchup with the Heat. They have the wing defenders, they have the outside defenders, they have Marcus Smart, you got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. I can go one-on-one with them, and then you can throw a combination of their centers at Bam Adebayo. But if the Bucks win, or whoever comes out of Miami and the Milwaukee, I think Milwaukee beats either Toronto or the Celtics, and I think the Toronto or the Celtics beat the Heat.
Yeah. Now, basketball, this is about the time that I really start getting into it because it's close to the finals.
They're good games.
Very good games. Yep.
So I'm glad this season worked out for the NBA, but we'll get back to you guys next week with some NFL preview going on, and we're going to make our predictions on we're going to go deep in the Detroit Lions, but we're going to talk about MVP, Rookie of the Year predictions, Defense Player, Offense Player of the Year predictions, Super Bowl matchup. We're going to dive deep into our season predictions. So,
yes. Yep, that'll be good.
We'll catch you guys next week then.
All right. See ya.
Yep.